Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to start our new theme in practical cities, which is housing for all. As a part of first masterclass, we are going to have with us Srivathsan sir.
Hello. Good evening.
Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Srivathsan sir is an architect and urban designer and currently director of Center for Research on Architecture and Urbanism at CEPT University, Ahmedabad. Previously, he was academic director of the university, taught for a decade in Chennai, and worked for about 8 years as a senior journalist with The Hindu, the national newspaper. His research and writing include the theme of urban history, planning, policy, contemporary practices. He has extensively written on urban development practices, policies, and master plans of Chennai, and his recent work includes the study of Chennai housing dynamics and determinants for Tamil Nadu State Planning Commission. So, sir, as a part of today's masterclass, I wanted to ask you, what is a housing market right now, as in India and also in Chennai? And why is it important for young professionals like us to learn about this housing policy and practices?
Today, urban development and housing is not entirely, led by state. State, both center and various state governments rely on market to actually implement some of their policies. In fact, policies are also at times devised to encourage private sector investment. So it's not only about investment, but also it works at the larger political belief, political economic belief that the private sector is better and they have better capacity and they deliver better than state. And this has been a sort of a belief for a few decades by now. But I don't want to get into that debate, but the fact remains that anyone today working on urban development, housing, or any other aspect of urban development has to work with markets. And even to understand what's going on, either as a plan or a policy, a good sense of the market is absolutely essential.
So, as a part of today's masterclass, sir, you are going to explain about affordable housing in Chennai, ground view, which is also, you can tell, a practical view of your. So, yeah, sir, you can go on.
Yeah. You see, people have been working on affordable housing for many decades now. I myself have been following this for a few decades by now. So increasingly, as I've been reading, following, and also doing some research, I increasingly feel there is a necessity to get a ground view of some of these policy implications. And particularly coming to housing, I think many policies have to be city specific because the demand, supply, land market, the capacity of the market, capacity of the state, the institutional arrangement varies from city to city, state to state. So it's only up to a point that a national or a meta view can help. But to actually even measure the efficacy or understand the efficacy of any policy, we need to figure out on ground. So it's not just only about how it is implemented in ground, but the ground, sometimes the policy is, in a sense, ignorant, not ignorant, they know it, but they overlook the ground conditions, or they're reluctant to learn from what's happening in ground. Second, I'm increasingly interested in city-specific studies, both in planning and urban development. I'm not saying that each city or each instance is specific and different from others, and there is no commonality or no sharing possible. But the specifics are important, and I feel that more and more as I sort of look into this issue. So that's one reason why I want to focus on Chennai in the context of affordable housing. I have something to share. I have a short presentation. I hope to finish it in next 20 minutes. So just to in order to keep it brief, I have the details, but I'm not going to dwell on the details, but I'll show them, but point out to the broad issues. And anyone interested can read the slide for smaller details. Okay. So let me go to my presentation and share the screen. See, most of you know that the affordable housing question or housing question in general is about shortage. What is the demand? What is the supply? And particularly when it comes to affordability, what is affordability? So in that definition of what is affordable, how is the demand? How is the supply? And this is not the first time people are asking such questions. It's been asked and answered by policies. So particularly in the context of Chennai and Tamil Nadu, what is the housing policy has put in place certain things. My question is whether it has made any impact on the ground. If it has made any impact, how do we measure it? How do we know the policy outcomes are beneficial? And increasingly since 1980s and more so post 2000, state governments and state institutions are relying on private market to supply affordable housing. So my question is I mean, theoretically there is demand, and hence theoretically the market should find that it can cater to the demand and make some profit out of it. But the question is, does it really happen? Is it true? Is there a difference between the theory and the ground conditions? So these are some 4 questions I would want to take you through this. And I'm relying heavily based on a study we did myself and 𝗗𝗲𝗰𝗲𝗿𝗲𝗿 at MIDS Chennai in 2019. So it was a case study. So we had a set of research questions, about 10 to 12 of them. So I'm drawing substantially from this to take you through this issue. So the first difficulty that we found in estimating housing demand for Chennai, and in that particularly, what is the demand for affordable housing, was really a difficult task for us. Because we realized as we went, there are at least 4 or 5 ways in which people were estimating housing demand, and each came up with different numbers. Okay, so CMDA said it's 6.59. The TNSP said it's 3.51 lakhs units. Using Kundu Committee's assessment of the national level and district, so it was 12.5. CEPT studies showed it was 0.87. So we were not, and we also found the policy as the Tamil Nadu State Housing Policy, Affordable Housing Policy, also has not picked any method. In fact, it doesn't have any numbers. So that's the first big problem. So I want to know through the policy how it has assessed the ground condition. What is its assessment of the demand and what is its assessment of the supply? That's a very fundamental basic step. So if you really see at the state level policies, or if you work with TNHP or TNSEB or CMDA in the case of Chennai, the first difficulty is there are different methods. This is in terms of demand. In our case, we took a Kundu committee and adjusted it because Kundu committee works on census, but whereas your planning boundaries are not matching with census boundaries. For example, if you take the Chennai agglomeration area, it includes Chennai, 𝗗𝗲𝗰𝗲𝗿𝗲𝗿, Kanchipuram, and those kind of places. But actually, the CMA boundary or the Chennai metropolitan area boundary is not congruent. It doesn't fit. So you'll have to make some adjustments on the ground. So because the housing agencies themselves don't do any field survey, correct? So they rely and extrapolate census data. So that is the first problem. Second, supply. So actually there is no supply data. Okay, you may get some supply data from TNHP and TNSEB, okay, which is a slum board and housing board. But you will not get any data about what is the private housing supply. So our task when we wanted to understand what is the demand and supply, substantial amount of time was spent in collecting this data. So what we did is, of course, we can't given a small fund of 10 lakhs in a 6 months time. I mean, it's not a very big funding. So this was very difficult to do. So we had 3 research assistants, 2 of us, 5 of us working. So we relied basically on the approval data of the CMDA and used the approval data. We took it. This is a limitation of this data. We took that the approval data is the supply data. There could be a time lag between approval and commencement, but in the absence of another possibility, we just took the approval data. But there too, you see, you get special buildings data, you get multi-story buildings data, but you won't get ordinary buildings, which is ground and floor, which is one of the largest suppliers of smaller houses and rental houses. And that data is with the corporation, and corporation is not at all organized. So there is a huge data difficulty. So, but we can't say, I can't do the study because we don't have a complete data. So we have to build the data. So we use the data and we figure out, you see, basically, you find in the affordable housing sector in the private, only 12,000 units have been produced. Okay, bulk of the units are coming from TNSEB, which is producing about 1 lakh unit. Okay, now basically you're getting about 1,35,000 over a period of five years or 4 years. So essentially what you're saying is you are getting about 35,000 units per year. And if you look at what is the demand that you need, if you rely on the Kundu committee, there is a huge gap that's quite evident. Okay, so another interesting thing that this data tells us is what is the median price of these units. You'll find very interestingly that the median price of the houses produced in the private sector is roughly in the order of 30 to 35 lakhs. And what is equally surprising is that the TNHPs, which is the Housing Board median price, is also not very different. So though the TNHP is a government entity, which has had the powers to acquire land and produce, it's producing at 33. And that's important, we'll come to that number quickly. Now, the next difficulty is, what is affordability? How do we measure affordability? So affordability many studies say is a factor of 3 things. One is price and income ratio. What is the relationship between the price of the unit sold? What is the median income of people who live in that city? Okay, here is why city-specific studies are important. The price to income can vary dramatically from location to location. The second factor of this is these standards or unit size. Price with respect to what size? Are you talking 250 square feet house? Are you talking 350, 450, 650? So that is the unit size. The third thing is the mobility cost. Where are you and how far you have to travel to your area of work, and that cost also has to be factored. In our case, we didn't have the capacity to factor the mobility cost. It was beyond our scope. So we dropped but we focused on price to income ratio and as well as the standard size. Now, if you look at this table, there are different ways of defining affordability. Deepak Parikh committee is the most reliable, or for us it is the most reliable, which talks about 4x of the annual household income of the family. Okay, or the KPMG extends it to 5x report on housing. Okay, so GST and RBI, you may know that the GST on affordable housing has been reduced from 8% to 1%. And the definition there is the price should be 45 lakhs and the unit size should not exceed 600 square feet if within metropolitan cities, if it's outside up to 900, but the price is 45 lakhs. Okay. Now, you see here, this table on the right-hand side. Now, the first row on top is the MPC, monthly expenditure, based on the NSSO data. And we computed for 3 districts, Chennai, Kanchipuram, and Tiruvallur, around, which makes the urban agglomeration. So you find the amount annual expenditure is 2 lakhs, 1.6, 1.7, for EWS 4, 3, and 3.6. So we are taking expenditure and income as equal, because at a lower income, there's hardly a saving. Of course, we could do better if we actually not rely on the expense data, but on the savings data, but we haven't taken that. So we have relied on this data. So what does this mean? Suppose if you take 4x as the price to income ratio of affordability, for EWS, you see is 8 lakhs and LIG 16. If you take 5x, it's between 10 to 20. So this is for Chennai district, Chennai and its immediate adjacent. So this is the benchmark for us. Okay. Now we have to overlay this on a price control. So we developed some GIS-based maps using guideline value. These are not market value, but it's proportionate to the market value. So what you call Jantri rate in North. In South, it's called the guideline value published by the government. So if we were to approximate this, and we took some help from a GIS person, used the contouring technique, because city is not a gradient, city is actually like a contour. So there'll be valleys and peaks at different places. So, and it gives you generally a distance of, the CMA boundary is roughly about 30 kilometers from the city center, Nungambakkam, where, the major commercial and jobs, retail and office spaces are there. Of course, there are various growth corridors, and the darker is higher, the lighter is lower price. So this is the gradient. Now on this, we mapped various housing projects over those 4 years, 2014 to 2018, we mapped this number. So each circle size indicates what is the number of units in each project. Okay, and all the ones in greenish are private, and all the orange and light yellow are government units. Okay, we lay it on this, and as I told you, you'll have to bear the other prices in mind. Affordability ranges 15 lakhs to 20 lakhs. Okay, that's what the affordability is. So if you put that, all the ones in black are non-affordable. All the ones in white fall under that region. So you'll be surprised to see some units within the city is also affordable. That's because they're all slumlord or slumlord houses. So you please bear in mind the outer line, which is the CMA boundary line, and the inner line is the city. City is about 420 square kilometers, 426 square kilometers. The outside is 1,189 square kilometers. So you would find that you will be priced out of the city. So you can't buy houses of, let's say, 400 square feet, which is comparable with what the slum board gives, 350 to 415 square feet is what the slum board develops, which is the minimum housing standard. You will not get it within the city limits. So in other words, you need to move out as far as 30 kilometers. Okay, one may say that itself is not a bad thing because probably the job markets are close by. But in this case, the job markets, we have not mapped, but you see the periphery job markets are, the periphery job markets are more IT related. So, but that's something that we can add to and see where. Now, quickly to sum up at this point, so we move forward quickly. So the data and city planning boundaries are not congruent. So there is no reliable data available. So congestion is a very big factor. So it's not supply of new units. Upgrading and repairing and expanding, which is a core problem within city area. Because most of the policies do not address. Most of the policies are basically looking at supplying new units. Okay, it's more conceptualizing it more like a greenfield problem. So how do we address congestion is a very difficult issue and not much has been done. As I told you, the affordability range given Chennai is around 20 lakhs. Okay. Now, the affordable housing supplied by the private is achieved by reducing the size. But if you compare the cost or the price of the affordable of housing by private sector per square feet, there is no difference between an affordable housing unit and a higher housing unit. Both are sold at 3,500 to 4,500 at the periphery. Okay, the only thing is you buy small unit, it is between 25 to 20, 25 lakhs, and that's what it is. But otherwise, there is nothing specific to affordable housing in terms of cost per square. That's more or less the same. It's only by reducing the size. So one argument by the housing or the state government is, we'll increase the supply of smaller housing units because that itself is problematic because most of the places you don't get studio apartments or one-bedroom apartment around 400 square feet because the market for 600, 900 and 1200 are very good. So see, this is another problem. In the city where the real estate market is flourishing, where the major segment of supply is between 50 lakhs and 80 lakhs, there is no incentive for private sector to come and look at smaller units. This is the reality of the condition. So what the government is saying is, we will nudge the market, which is okay as a concept. So how do you nudge? You give a reduction in GST, you give FSI incentive, you give some kind of a credit sort of support to the real estate. So bulk of that is supplied by housing slum board. So the private sector's contribution currently is low. So here I'll just quickly, I want to detail out this. The Tamil Nadu came up with affordable housing policy in 2020. This is the latest, okay? So they're worried, like any other government, that the subsidy has to be cut. So we can't put money more and more. We'll have to do for those who are paying. Absolute poor, we'll try and take care, but most of it has to come from private sector. Okay. Now they've done some good things, like they've removed minimal conditions on plot sizes and others, but they're relying on market to cater. But the worst problem of the biggest issue with this policy is it doesn't define affordability. It doesn't give you numbers. It doesn't tell you how many households are below 20 lakhs, how many households are below 35 lakhs affordability range. So you really don't know to which sector the policy is addressing. What is it trying to solve? So there is no empirical information in this policy. Because in its absence, at the end of the day, after 3 years, 5 years, I can't go back and check and tell whether you achieved or not. And okay, so there is so they're more and more, they're looking at giving FSI incentives, increasing density, which is through higher FSI again, standardized contracts, reduce transaction cost. And in particular, Tamil Nadu has come up with what's called a shelter fund. I'll take that as the last slide of this presentation. So the question now is, okay, this is from the government's perspective. How does the market look at it? So we interviewed about more than 12 developers, because this is only a interview-based data gathering. There is no data. It's only now RERA is putting out data, but even in RERA, you don't have price information. You have information on the units, carpet size, saleability, parking, etc. That's a very useful data, but you don't get a price data. So you need to combine that with the advertisements that come in the newspaper. So I'll take one project at the end just to show that. We have combined the RERA data and the ad data. Now, private sector has an entirely different understanding of affordability. They do not go by government definition, because there is a threshold for a private developer beyond which it's not workable for them, given their overheads, transaction cost. So anything less than 40 lakhs, 30 lakhs is not at all attractive for them, because there is a flourishing 40 lakhs market. Even at the periphery, for example, at the edge of the CMA boundary, I live at the edge of the CMA boundary, outside CMA boundary. So here the cost of a completed flat is 3,500 rupees a square feet. So which means you would have to spend about 25, 30 lakhs to get a reasonable size of a house. So you can't get in my place anything less than this price. So you can't get a 20 lakh house now. Not that there is no demand, but the point is it makes no sense for the developer to put in money there. So affordability, second, see, there is a counter move by the government, because for GST purposes, they've defined 40 lakhs as affordable. And they're giving incentive. And the same definition of 600 square feet and 45 lakhs continue into other policies. So why would I want to look at 20 lakh and 30 lakh houses when the threshold of affordability is already fixed at 45 lakhs for GST purposes? And you're fixing 600 square feet. So what does 600 square feet mean in a city core? So inside the city limits, you won't get any house less than 8,000 to 10,000 square feet. So if you're taking 600 square feet, you're talking nothing less than 60 lakhs. So forget the city. You have to talk outside the city. So this is this countervailing view. You see, the one policy gives some definition. The ground condition is different. The theoretical understanding of data-based, of course, empirically based thing about price to income and all gives you another picture. So there is no, the policies do not take these differences. So what the private market is saying is only when the other high-end and the middle income market is saturated, we will focus on this. And we will also focus on this basically when we have difficulties in generating and sustaining cash flows. So we would not actually, it's not our interest. Okay. So we quickly took some projects, launched what is called the affordable housing sector between 16 and 19 outside CMA, and look at the prices. Okay, so the land price is becoming very important. So they want to take it far outside if you have to bring the prices down. But the point is, the commute becomes longer. The quality of life becomes difficult because you may not have schools, as children have to travel more, and so on and so forth. So this is how the condition is. So the private sector is getting into supplying 35 lakhs sort of houses, but they're fairly far away from this, as this thing shows. Now, how does the private sector look at various incentives? See, additional FSI, they're saying very good, because from 1.5 it became 2, and various premium FSIs are waived 30%, 40, 50%, 100%, depending on the affordable housing. But they're saying it does not have a marginal reduction price. I remember having a conversation with one of the policy makers in government. So who told me, see, Srivathsan, we have increased FSI by 20%. The prices will come down by 20%. I told him, sir, price don't work like that, because markets don't price it like that. Price is a very complex phenomenon. For example, prices operate on a micro market level. It doesn't sometimes even operate at a city level market. So if I am developing a housing at 30 kilometer, then that area, what is the saleability? If you move 4 kilometers and enter into another micro market, the prices will differ. So the prices are not, and second, if I can sell 40 and 50 lakh houses in that place, why would I want to sell at this? So I'll just come to the numbers quickly. So what they found was the credit subsidy scheme was very good, which gives you an interest subsidy, but the ability to access credit subsidy is you need to have a regular employment. You need to be having some credit worthiness and so on and so forth. So access to finance becomes a difficulty. For example, it's something that I'm working on currently, I'm writing on it. So for example, how do finance companies fund truck drivers who don't have jobs but want to apply for truck? It's based on their cash flow and so on. So there's a whole set of indicators. So current policies rely on conventional creditworthiness. Okay. So we did a quick study to see what is the actual impact of FSI on prices. So if you increase 30% FSI, 50% FSI, what is the impact on prices? It's probably not more than 5 to 7% is the impact. So it doesn't mean just you put 50% more FSI or 100% more FSI, you don't expect immediately the market to come down and sell at this, because there is a whole range of costs involved, not just the land cost. For example, like this, the FSI cost is about 20, 25. Construction cost is 40, 45. The transaction cost, which includes all kinds of charges, sometimes bribes and so on. Of course, the developer says the profit margin is 10, but you should take it as 15 to 20%. So GST 1. So sale price is saying we can't do anything less than 3,500 square feet. So this is what the market can do. So you see at the top is what you're triggering. The policy is aiming to increase, reduce the cost, FSI cost of land. That is what Alan Berto will say substitute land for, you're substituting land with capital. So you're trying to do that by doing FSI. But studies all over the world have shown just because you increase FSI in density, that doesn't lead to affordability. You should have a separate layer of affordability over it, which to me is a price to income and mobility and standards problem. So there is a whole range of empirical studies that are needed to test some of this. What does it mean on ground? What is the FSI cost? Because if the land cost is very high, then people want to take the benefit of higher FSI. But if the land cost is very high, anyway, you're out of the affordability bracket. So we need to do a series of empirical studies to measure many of these incentives. So what is the GST's impact in supply? What is the FSI increase difference? What is the interest subsidies in? So we need a series of numbers to evaluate. So basically, GST makes a difference, but access to credit matters, sale price is independent, something that I showed you before. So just before I wrap, a couple of points. Though the private developers supply affordable housing at 350, 450, it is sold as second homes, and people buy two houses and join it. So you buy two 400 square feet, you get a 800 square feet house. You take the benefits of all that. FSI has not impacted selling price substantially. So the sub 20 lakh range will not be affordable by small builders sometimes. Only large builders who can probably control costs through other means. Market is highly fragmented, and many small developers are actually the real suppliers of affordable housing. They work in 2 grounds, 1.5 grounds, which is one ground is 2,400 square feet. So they work at 4,000. So policies do not aim at small builders. They basically aim at the CREDAI kind of builders, large scale builders. So there's a whole segment of builders who are not sort of addressed by the policies. And the biggest problem is we are not supplying serviced lands and small plots, because all the proposals are aiming at mega projects, large housing campuses. But there would be a substantial increase in supply if we were to supply small plots. So the layout rules, etc., could come and supply more. So we are looking at multiple strategies. So you cannot rely on only one strategy, which is FSI. You'll have to have multiple strategies. You have to integrate it with master plan, etc. Now I just finished with this. So now there's a new thing called Shelter Fund. So there is a Shelter Fund 1, Shelter Fund 2. Shelter Fund 1 is collected as a cess from various builders. And that money will be used by Housing Board and Slum Board to develop affordable housing. We have no data so far as to how much has been collected, what is the unit. I understand very small amounts have been utilized, though money has been collected substantially. Shelter 2, the Tier 2 fund is the most problematic. To me, it has all the trappings of a scam. So this is my last slide. So recently there was an announcement that a private builder was given 95 crores. See, how the Shelter Fund 2 works is, Shelter Fund 2, government puts money, World Bank has put millions of dollars, ADB has put millions of dollars, I think JICA has also put. So it's a very large corpus. Then they select private builders based on their profile and the proposal feasibility, and give them advance them money to build affordable housing at some very convenient interest terms. So this was a big announcement that they have paid 95 crores for a project in a place called Tirunusai, which is about 30 kilometers from Chennai. So on the right, you see the pictures from the project announcement. Just look at the data below. On the face of it, there is a fact 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 35 lakhs house. But just look at the cost, 5,700 square feet per square feet. Okay, which is something, it's far more expensive even from the rates currently which the market is set. And who will want to spend 5,700 rupees per square feet in a place far away? And why would I want to buy a 25 square meter house at this cost? So I need minimum 40 So here, see, again, here is a policy initiative. So somebody came with a bright idea, said, okay, let's do shelter fund. And they said, okay, shelter fund one, because it's collected as a cess, compulsory, mandatory, they can't divert it to private project because you will face court cases. Now they created shelter fund two, which is actually listed and you can mobilize funds through various ways, equity contribution, whatever. Now here is, look at it, there is no cap on the price of the house that you're selling. From state government to World Bank, they don't want to define affordability as a factor of price and income. They're still defining it by size. But all the studies show that is not how it works. Okay, at one level, this is a specific story of Chennai. But what are the larger questions for us? The larger questions is, how do we make policies based on evidence? This is what many would talk as an evidence-based policy making. So here is a policy, you've got no data, no information, don't have demand, supply, affordability threshold, but you're going ahead and making a policy. But once you get in the ground and pick up all this data, it really seriously questions both the understanding of the problem and as well as its solution. So at one level, you should see this, I think, at one level. For us, it's actually we are engaging on the ground trying to influence policy. But at another, you may look at it as an evidence-based policy making has become imperative. And every policy should have clearly stated outcomes that we can verify, either quantitatively or qualitatively, more quantitatively because that's mostly absent. And this is a classic case. I'm sure every city has some story like this to say. And in this way also, I'm able to sort of demonstrate that you need to understand market and policies closely. Thank you. I'll stop here. I'll take some questions.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. I would just like to recap a few things that were really interesting. So affordability, which is basically you started your presentation with demand and supply, which is one of the key thing in housing sector. Second is you explained the term affordability, which is equal to pricing and the income ratio also. And so also you talked about private players selling price, which is around 3,500 to 4,000 approx. And at last also you talked about shelter fund 1 and 2, and also showed a case study, which is 𝗗𝗲𝗰𝗲𝗿 case study. I had few questions. So sir, first, I would like to understand one of the key definition. I'm going to basics now. So as a starter, first question, what is the difference between LIG, EWS and slums?
The one clear definition, I believe in objective definitions. And I would place purely on income criteria. So it varies from state to state, and also this number household income is actually revised time and again. So for example, in Chennai, it has been revised. I can't just quickly remember if I open the presentation there is an income definition. So what is important is we have to keep these numbers clearly defined. So when I say EWS, what is the average income, household income I'm talking about? If I'm saying LIG, what is the average household income I'm talking about? And what is MIG? So that needs to be defined. But I'm open to the idea that these incomes can be defined, redefined place to place, time to time. Because as the economic conditions grow, the income levels, I'm assuming, need not be, because sometimes growth can be there, per capita may do, but the distribution of income may not be there. But just for argument's sake, so when the cities grow wealthier, see, for example, what is the per capita income of Chennai compared to per capita income of Bangalore, Ahmedabad? And what is the distribution of the various income? And so all that is important. So EWS LIG to me is primarily a slum is as defined as the condition of living. So we know the classic thing of how the old Delhi itself was almost designated a slum, though it's not really slum as you would possibly imagine as an informal a poor living condition, without access to water supply, sanitation, and so on. And second, we are also now defining not only with unit terms, but also we are talking in terms of housing. So in terms of access to social infrastructure has become very critical and now in even influencing policies. We are not, because the old way of doing things was only based on unit size, unit level facilities, but now we are talking. So I think the definitions have to be clear. It has to be stated upfront. We can't be ambiguous about what we understand as slum, what is EWS, LIG. And our policies must engage with them and demonstrate that it has engaged.
Yes. Yeah, so continuing to this, your presentation also highlighted one point on the rental housing. So there is also, I was just listening, say, for example, I am going as an employee, I'm going to some other city, say, for example, Chennai or outside the Chennai boundary, outer CMA boundary, which you showed. So my major office is in Chennai. So how will this, and there are lots of people who want to stay. So how this migrant and rental housing would work in terms of pricing scenario?
See, migrant, low income migrant. See, there's another big issue here, which I've not highlighted or not even presented. See, every construction project pays assess towards a construction welfare. But there is a large amount of money has been collected. So I believe there was, I'm not sure, but I believe there was a court case or some complaint that what have you done with this? And hurriedly they built a migrant housing scheme based on the funds that they've collected. Now what has happened is they built this housing at such a place which makes no sense to the migrant labor market. See, either they're working in the construction sector or they're working in some industry. So the location was hurriedly done. Okay, then they thought the problem was in design and they tried to redesign. So the point is, there are funds, but migrant housing as a product of housing type has not been built. But in the Tamil Nadu housing policy of 2020, they've identified it. To their credit, they're saying we'll have to increase the products. It's not just housing in the conventional sense. We have to have migrant housing, we have to have girls' hostel, we have to have night shelters, etc. So to that extent, but the point is what is being done. You see, when you say this, I have no argument with you because it's a motherhood apple pie argument. What can I say? I can't say you can't build migrant housing, but I like to know, show me. So that's one. The rental housing, you see, they brought in a new rental registration act. So, they thought people are not registering. They're afraid of rental. Hence, the houses are locked. But the process is so cumbersome. There's hardly, I don't think anyone have gone ahead and registered. See, they identify that they're identifying the problem correctly, which is basically there's not enough rental housing supply. The amount of houses under lock and key is increasing more and more. But how do we do that? But which is not just a housing problem. So how's the registration department? What a cumbersome procedure. How much money I have to shell out, the time that's taken to register. And second, if I go for a civil, I have to end up in a civil court. I take the case. It takes me, I myself had fought some personal house related cases. It takes you about 2.5 years to get a verdict. So, it has to be worked within the larger governance ambit. You can do what you can do within your policy limits and increase, give tax benefits. Because you're not charging second home and third home as some countries have done. For example, I still can get lowest interest for even second homes, third ones. My capital gains tax in selling my second home, if I want a second home, is not very different. Say just the same, I get the same benefits. It is not the case in some places. For example, the down payment for your second homes, third homes will be very high in some countries, but not here. Because I see some logic there, but you're saying is that I will put out in rental housing. So there are some things, but these are all, if the supply of low income housing is less, and if it's broadly you're putting higher middle income, higher income housing, what is going to come inside the rental market will also be those kind of houses. So if you see where the rental for low-income migrant housing are in actually informal settlements or in old areas of what is called like sites and services schemes in Ahmedabad is again a major supplier of low rental housing. But even that's gone very expensive these days, I'm told. I studied a small case in a fishing hamlet within Chennai city. A hut is divided into two with a thatch in the middle. One side is rent for a migrant housing. I forget what's the rental. I did it about 5-6 years ago, and separately for electricity. So there are innovative ways in which the people adjust. So we also don't recognize incremental housing, supply of small plots, and people step up and all that. So the rental housing still focuses on middle and higher income housing. And some of these new acts facilitating EC registration, compulsory registration are not happening because people find it so difficult to negotiate registration. And to get that eviction and other things within the difficult, I don't think that's people will embrace it. So there are, but it's a very important thing because not everyone can own or would own a house immediately. You know, a migrant inside a city would first take a rental housing. And then as the economic gains increase, growth increases, the person can buy something, a small house. Probably in 2 generations might have a reasonable good house. That's the hope. But the supply again there, we have not done extensive empirical data on rental housing, so I'm not able to give you numbers for Chennai. But I'm sure the story would be similar.
Yes. So next question was related to, there was a slide in terms of environmental solution and climate change thing. So recently Chennai also faced a severe flood and rainfall, which was there in Chennai. In terms of that, so say there is a flood prone area, which maybe municipality is kind of highlighting it, or maybe newspapers are highlighting it. So the space or there or pricing scenario there will also change drastically, even if it is in the red zone, darker zone. So then also people will, the pricing scenario will change. How is this going to affect the housing sector?
Many of the early housing slumboard and all that were in relatively low-lying areas. Some housing schemes have even encroached on big beds and all that. So now there is an increasing pressure on the state to be careful. But all said, for example, some very fundamental things we need. I don't see in the public domain a map which tells me what is the flood, urban flood vulnerability of different parts of the city. And if I have that, I superimpose all the housing projects over that. Then as a buyer, I would know that I can still buy for various reasons. That's not, that's second step. The first step itself, the level of information. In terms of for me to know what is the vulnerability of this space, and which is not very difficult because see, even if you have not done anything before, since 2015, which was the major urban flood Chennai faced, it's almost 6-7 years. Every year we are facing this. So I'm told corporation has done some mapping, etc. But I would like to see it on the public domain, and I like to see that superimposed on some spatial planning strategies. For instance, there are some cities in the world which have designated as flood zone 1, 2, and 3, and they're not only building rules, but the developers are cautioned, the buyers are cautioned, and every year the cost of repair and the whole, the effort to get the houses repaired and clean is substantial, and people can't keep on spending. So there's a lot of that's one part of it. Second is also going forward as city grows. Really clearly, city Chennai has shown that you need to work with the waterways, you have to work with the contours, the whole natural surface drainage, etc., has to be respected when you do the thing. So how would you manage your spatial planning with that of the environmental assets in the light of all these things will become very critical. Otherwise, we'll continuously face this every year. So that's a big problem, and particularly low-income housing, because the land has to be cheap, and invariably it's a low-lying land. It's in a very far-flung place. There's no infrastructure. See, this is also very important. See, Chennai doesn't, only now they've announced that they're going to do what's called the grid of roads for about 54 villages. Basically, have a virtual road layout. So as developments come, the road layouts will be. So only when you have the roads can you think of stormwater. When you don't have proper road network, where will you think of a problem? So there are a lot of things needed in general and specific to, and I think going forward, it'll become a very critical issue, and people are going to demand these things.
Yes. So last question, as a young professional and also students who are viewing this, would how this housing sector is going to grow, and in terms of we trying to learn, like you have researched this project, and what are other research topics related to housing sectors that we should deep dive into?
Housing, you see from the colonial times, ever since urbanization was felt and moved from public health concern to growth management, housing is in the center. Okay, now environment has acquired same dimensions. Of course, in between post-liberalization, how to make city as a site of investment, gain currency. But housing will always remain as a core issue. And you're seeing that repeatedly, not only in developing countries, but even developed countries. Global North has the same problem. You repeatedly see how property markets have heated up. People have been priced out, shortage of reasonable social housing. This is going to be a problem. One, because all that, I remember reading something in the 2000 of how with technology coming in, the cities will be dispersed. I will sit anywhere and work anywhere. But actually, to the contrary, technology and financial institutes has only strengthened metropolitan areas, and it's not produced the kind of dispersal that we thought of. So I'm not sure if that sort of a dispersal will happen. I don't want to predict either, but going by what we are seeing, housing will be center, particularly large cities. And if we agree to the numbers and prediction of urbanization, growth of million+ cities in India and all that, housing will continue. So it's a very important area to work with. I would like to see a lot of these kind of empirical studies because at this stage, I'm not saying maybe it will be the same forever, but at this stage, we are not able to understand many things about land, property, price, income, supply. So a substantial amount of urban economics have to come inside policy making and even design to that extent and planning. So this area between planning and urban economics is an area where I don't think many are working, not in this part of the world, particularly in this country. So I would like to see a lot of work there. That's there, and certainly because it's evident that a single strategy will not work. You need to have multiple strategies. You will have to improve construction, you will have to improve planning, you have to look at finance, all that. So it calls for all kinds of people in this. I think housing will always remain a very critical sector.
Yes. So thank you, sir, for this wonderful masterclass. And just to add what you told, the data on this housing is also very important. So kind of research on all the other cities like you did for Chennai, for other cities, and trying to extrapolate all these cities together and trying to map how India is doing in the housing sector. That will be also a good study. And thank you, sir, for this wonderful masterclass with Practical Cities. We are all students and we are doing this for the students and young professionals. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting. It was a pleasure talking to you all. I hope this was helpful and to think through your own questions and your areas of work. And I also appreciate your initiatives, the Practical Cities initiative, to sort of create some engaging conversation. All the best for your future endeavors. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye.